Hey everybody, what is up? It's Antonio. Welcome back to another episode here on Gladiator Disc Golf. I'm so excited for today's video because we're doing something that I've never done before on this channel. Today, I'm hosting a Q&A. I posted a question a couple weeks ago on the Gladiator Disc Golf community tab here on YouTube, and I basically just asked, hey, I'm planning on making some putting videos in the next couple of weeks. What are some questions you have? Maybe what are some things you want to see? And I've made a couple putting videos in that time, but one of the things I thought would be really cool would be to basically take the questions that were there and work through them and answer them in this kind of format. Q&A. Like I said, I've never done something quite like this before, so I'm really excited about it. So if at any point in the video you find that you really like this format, go ahead and give it a like. That way I know that you want to see more of this, and I'll start posting more questions like that, trying to help you guys answer some particular questions. Now also, in the little time bar basically for YouTube, I have chapters, and so if you highlight over some of those chapters while this video is playing, you'll see specific questions, and if those questions relate to you, you can just go ahead and jump right to them. You don't have to necessarily sit and watch the entire video once you get your answer. So let's go ahead and let's talk about putting. So let's go ahead and let's get started with the first question from Gruntled. And as absolute beginners, which of the styles of putting should my wife and I start to learn first? This is a great question, especially as people are either learning new putting styles or they're brand new to the sport. And my initial thought to this is to go with what's comfortable. There's a lot of different putting tips and strategies out there. There's a lot of things that you as a disc golfer have to know how to do. You can not only know how to straddle putt or stagger putt or push putt or spin putt. When you play this game long enough, you realize you have to know how to do all of those things. But when you're first starting out, I strongly recommend sticking with what's comfortable. The biggest thing when you're learning how to play disc golf is finding that confidence and finding what basically helps you score. Now, obviously, we don't want to be having terrible form or those kinds of things. We want to be working on those from the get-go. But with putting, find what's comfortable for you. Gruntled, it may be a stagger putt, and for your wife, it may be a straddle putt for her, or a push putt, or a spin putt, or a combination of the two for either one of you. So I definitely recommend finding what's comfortable and sticking with that for at least a couple weeks and getting good at it so that you feel confident on the putting green. The next question comes from Sean No Last 4136, and he says, I have an intermittent issue with a disc pulls right. I think it's a timing thing, probably not enough info to go on, but if you know something, help me fix it. I'm more push putt than spin putt, but some spin. So it sounds like you have a little bit of what we would call a spush putt, Sean No Last 4136. And with the disc pulling right, there are a couple things that immediately come to mind. First, especially if you're saying that you are more of a push putt, I imagine you're probably doing a little bit of a straddle as well. And so if you're missing right, when you're straddling, go ahead and make sure that the arm and your disc is dropping down in the middle of your body, not to this right side of your body. So that means on your release, your arm's going to be kind of a little angled in a little bit, but that's going to help the disc release straight. If you're straddling and your arm's coming out this way, you're going to miss right a lot more, even though you're lined up in the middle. So definitely, if you're straddling and you're doing a push putt, keep that disc in the center. Now, the other thing is, since you have a little bit of a spush putt, you have some of that spin, your wrist could be opening out too far on your putt, and that can be pulling the disc a little bit. We all have follow-throughs in our throws and our putts, but the specific thing about putting is you want that wrist to lock in like you're shaking hands with the basket. The moment your wrist starts to kind of flare out a little bit more, it's far easier for the disc to pull right. So those are the two things. Make sure that the disc is aligned on your release with the center of the basket, and make sure that your wrist isn't flaring open. I hope those things help you. This is definitely a problem a lot of people have the moment they start adding even a little spin to their putt. So you're not alone, but I hope this tip helps you. The next question we have is from Harwin's Out Again. They ask, I'm having trouble with spin and speed of putters flying out of your hands. I'm primarily a spin putter. I'll watch the pros putt from 50 feet away and the disc just had this very nice float and glide towards the basket or whatever hyzer arc they released it on. I never have that nice glide in flight. Maybe mine just kind of lacklusterly lose speed and just start hard fading to the left. I can hit putts okay at 15 feet, but that 20 and beyond range feels like I don't have the power to get to the basket cleanly. So a couple things here when I read this, especially as someone who says that they're a spin putter, not having the power. Typically, you don't hear about spin putters feeling like they're lacking power to get to the basket. So that's definitely something very interesting in this question. Harwin's Out Again. There's a couple things that could be happening here. You didn't mention the putter that you're using, but it's possible if the disc is basically hyzering out early, because if you're not getting the power to get to the basket, it sounds like it's hyzering out early. It could be that you're using something too overstable. And I mean, we can even be talking about using something stable to overstable like a Luna or an AVR, comparable to those kinds of discs. So my first initial thought is check what kind of putter you're using. Try to use a putter that has no more than one fade. There are also some truly understable putters out there that have some turn on them. So try using something that's a little straighter to understable. That will kind of give you more flight. The other thing to think about is the glide rating on a disc. And glide is a very particular thing. We see putters typically only have anywhere from like 2 to 4 glide on the ones that we're normally putting with towards the basket, not counting approach discs. And yet we'll see drivers with more glide, and it's kind of this weird thing of like, but my putter feels like it just glides forever. Based on my limited understanding of flight dynamics, I would basically say that it probably has to do with some spin. Now, you may not be generating a whole lot of spin on your putt, and so it kind of is just like flopping out of your hand, and therefore the disc can't spin and it can't really get that glide and loft in the air. So I would recommend, Harwin's Out Again, change your putter to something that's straight to understable. And if you're already doing that, or if that doesn't help, try working on snapping that wrist a little more. On a spin putt, you have a lot more wrist snap, which technically means you're going to miss more times left or right, but rarely should you be having the issue where you're not able to reach the basket, especially from 20 feet. So there are a few things going on here that I don't exactly know because I haven't seen your form or your putt. But I hope those tips help. If you still have questions, you guys can go ahead and send me a video on GiveGo and I can help you with your putting. I actually have this code right here that will get you a free session, and so we can work together to address some of these questions. The next question comes from a longtime subscriber. I recognize this name. Let's go ahead and let's address Tony's Treehouse 7269. Tony, thank you so much for commenting. His question is, I'll throw one out there from about 20 feet. I can hit one after another, no problem. And then out of nowhere, one flies 2 or 3 feet right of the basket. I'm trying to figure it out. I think I might be releasing late, but I'm not sure. Any thoughts on that? So a couple things. One, I think we've all experienced that. So you are definitely not alone, Tony. My first initial thought is, are you warming up from 20 to 30 feet or are you starting closer? One of the issues that you could be dealing with here is that you're not properly warmed up, and so your mechanics aren't ready and you're really trying to force the disc to get to the basket on line from 20, 25, 30 feet. Now, the other thing could be is that instead of maybe your wrist kind of just flaring out, another possibility here is that as you're going through reps, you start to kind of not think about what you're doing, and so you maybe lose some of your form. Whereas if you normally putt with your disc coming down over your right leg, if you're a righty, maybe it starts to swing into the center of your gut, and so now you start pulling it to the right. So I would recommend, Tony, videoing yourself over a series of a lot of putts, not just like 2 or 3, but film an entire putting session, for a couple minutes. and then look through and focus on the ones that you missed and how your basically your form is different in those putts versus the ones where you make. I guarantee there's got to be some alignment issue, and it could be something so simple as just your hands coming down like 2 to 3 inches to the left, and so it's swinging out wide. Another thing to think about is your elbow. Depending on your comfort, I don't like putting with my elbow flared out because I feel like it's easier to miss right. I like keeping my elbow down like this, similar to how Calvin Heimberg putts. I know Paul has his elbow out a little bit further, but I prefer a more vertical drop on my elbow so that I don't miss to the right nearly as much. So go ahead and try that, record and check your form, and then also pay attention to what your elbow's doing on those putts that you miss and the putts that you make. Okay, we have a couple questions left, so let's go ahead and let's get to the next one from Chris Warfel. Basically just a statement: reading and understanding the wind. This is so tough. It is impossible to play disc golf and not deal with the wind at some point, whether you're driving off the tee, approaching the basket, or really probably the most nerve-wracking time to deal with the wind is when you're putting. And that is one of the hardest times to read the wind, especially if it's kind of gusting in and out. So there are a couple things that deal with this, and it's hard to kind of break it all down because there's so many different putting styles out there. Like there are so many nuances in a stagger putt with a spin release, and then a stagger putt with a push release, and then you have your straddle with a spin or a push, all of that. So I'll just try and keep it very simple and hopefully be able to cover as much ground as possible. Most people putt with a little nose up on their discs. And so that's kind of to help the putter glide a little bit more. So if you're dealing with the headwind and you have, let's actually grab a putter. If you are dealing with a headwind and you're putting a little nose up, that means that headwind's going to lift the disc, which is going to cause the disc to lift upwards. And so when you're facing a headwind, you either want to aim lower on the basket if you want to not change anything about your putt. So if you still want to putt nose up, aim lower on the basket, like right over the cage. Or you can putt flatter and then maybe even a little nose down. Now, if you putt flat, you don't have to change much about anything else. If you putt nose down, that headwind is now going to be pushing the disc down. So you actually want to aim higher than you normally would. So that's one variation. The other variation is a tailwind. So once again, a lot of people tend to putt a little bit naturally nose up. So a tailwind is now going to be pushing the disc down. So you actually want to aim a little higher on a tailwind with a nose up putt. Vice versa, if you have a flat or a nose down putt, that tailwind is actually going to lift it, especially on the nose down putt, a little bit more. So you would aim a little bit lower so that as the air or the wind lifts the disc, it doesn't lift it over the basket, but rather into the chains. Now, that can all come from practice, and that's a really good thing. One of the things though that I have noticed with putting is that everybody tends to have some degree of hyzer on their putts for what feels comfortable. And this is where crosswinds are a huge issue. Because if I putt with a hyzer line and I have a right to left crosswind, guess what? That flight plate is exposed to that crosswind. It's going to get lifted and pushed away. And so that's not good. And now in the same vein of thought, if I have a left to right crosswind, it's going to be pushing my putter down. So one of the things that I like to do when I'm putting, and I've worked on my form over time, is I have tried to find the best way to putt and minimize environmental effects, mainly wind. So I like to putt as flat as possible, maybe even slightly nose down. And I have no high, I try to limit the amount of hyzer on my putt. I really try to keep it flat. And here's why. When it's perfectly flat, the headwind on a putt isn't going to affect it enough to turn it over. A tailwind on a putt isn't going to affect it enough to lift it, push it down, or make it fade out early. We're talking inside circle 1, by the way. Circle 2 putts, you have a little bit more possibility with fading out early. But especially with crosswinds on a flat putt, you almost don't notice the crosswind whatsoever. And that's one of the biggest benefits to putting nice and flat, is basically giving yourself something you don't have to worry about. And so, Chris Warfel, reading and understanding the wind. I hope this answers your question. My recommendation, what I try to do is putt as flat as possible, similar to what Eagle does. Eagle is a great example of someone who putts flat and reduces the effect that wind has on his disc. And obviously, Eagle is otherworldly. Like, I would love to just be able to sniff at the talent and the ability that Eagle has. I don't know that I ever will. But this is something that I think all of us can do, is have that nice flat putt so that we can minimize wind's effect on the disc flight. And now for the final question, we have Keto Swami saying, yeah, missing. And Keto Swami, we have all been there. It is really, really tough. It's also really discouraging to miss your putt a lot. And so one thing that I strongly recommend, and this is something that is true for pretty much all aspects of disc golf, but I think putting kind of trumps all of the other parts. If you don't practice putting, you cannot basically get upset when you miss. Now, I'm talking to people who are looking to actively improve to the point where they're looking to compete. If you're just looking to improve to have fun and you don't have time to practice putting, that is totally fine. But if you are watching this and you want to compete in tournaments, or you are competing in tournaments, you want to get hopefully on the pro tour one day, or at least compete in your local A tiers, you have to practice putting. It's not always as fun as going out and playing around, but that is the best way to stop missing. And the thing with that is you want to start nice and close. Just because a putt is 5 or 10 feet away, you want to make it to where you never even think about missing those. You won't want to just practice 10 and 15 footers until you make them. Most of the time, you want to practice those putts until you can't miss. They are automatic. And the same thing goes as you start to work further out into the circle. So I always recommend starting close. I have a basketball background. I played basketball growing up, a little bit of organized, but mainly street ball. And one of the things when you're warming up that you notice pretty much every basketball player does is they start with layups. Sometimes if it's pretty empty, you'll just go one-handed on each side, doing layups from a foot away, 2 feet away. And then eventually you work back to the free throw line and you start shooting, and you start kind of doing an around the world type deal where you're shooting from different distances. And then you move out to the 3-pointers. Not even Steph Curry warms up with 3-pointers to start. Yeah, he's so good and dialed in, he can, but Steph practices other shots as well. And so just like in disc golf, start close to the basket, work your way out. It's way easier to dial in and fix your putt from 5 or 10 feet away than from 20, 25 feet away. If you don't have a basketball background, that's okay. If you have a firearm background, you know that when you're at a target range, you start with the target closer to you to really dial in your sights. And then you send it out further and further, because as the distance increases, whether you're at a firing range, basketball hoop, or on the putting green, as the distance changes, you want to make as little adjustment as possible because you don't want to skew everything. So practicing from really close, practicing consistently. Ideally, if you could practice every night, that's the best way to do it, or every morning, whatever your schedule's like. But at least a couple times a week will really help you dial in your putts and feel super comfortable. I really enjoyed reading your questions and answering them. I hope you liked the answers and you found them helpful. Remember, if you did, go ahead and give it a like and comment down below. What is the next kind of big overall topic that you would love for me to talk on and kind of answer your questions about? We don't want to get into the specific questions yet, but if you are mid-ranges, when do I use them, when do I don't, or different grips, things that are kind of more general topics in disc golf, go ahead and comment some ideas down below. That'll help me know kind of what's on your mind in the disc golf community. And the last thing I'll say before we head out here is, if you want to add an additional challenge to your putting practice, go ahead and check out Champ Cap. I recently joined their team. I've made a couple videos on their product and I like it a lot. It has already helped me improve my putting percentages and confidence and accuracy out on the course. So if you want to go ahead and check out a Champ Cap, use my code. You'll get free shipping. With every purchase, you support me as well, and I'm able to continue making content for you, especially in regard to putting. So I hope you guys found this video helpful and insightful, and it gave you something new that you can work on and maybe a little bit of food for thought. Until next time, everyone, have a great round.